Hi friends, this is Sarojam here. Welcome to my networking channel. Hope all are doing good. And today the topic I'm going to discuss about how to configure an aggregated interface, what we called as an LACP, Link Aggregation Control Protocol. So the process of bundling multiple interfaces, physical interfaces into a single logical link, what we called as an aggregated interface or a link bundling. And the main purpose of aggregation or link aggregation is for increasing the bandwidth. So here in between this firewall 1 and 2, I have connected two physical interface port 1 and 3. So I'm going to bundle these two interfaces into a single logical link. So main purpose for increasing the bandwidth and also for a link failover. And the protocol we use for bundling is LACP, that is a link aggregation control protocol. Okay, so in case of Cisco, we call it as a PAGP, which is Cisco proprietary. LACP is a link aggregation control protocol. So this protocol I can use between a Cisco device and the Fortigate firewall, or also between Fortigate firewall and other vendors I can use. So that this is standard based, what we called as a link aggregation control protocol. Okay, so as per the architecture, I connected two firewall 1 and 2, and this between this firewall 1 and 2 I connected two physical link port 1 and port 3, which I'm going to bundle into a single logical interface. And also to this firewall 1 and 2 I connected port 2. This is mainly for accessing the GUI of firewall 1 and 2. So I'm going to configure the port 2 for the GUI interface, and to port 4 I connected PC1 and PC2. So the PC1 IP is 10.2 and the PC2 IP is 192.168.20.2. So this gateway will be 10.1 and this will be 20.1. Similar way, this I am going to configure this with the IP address. One end is 192.168.1.1 and the other end is 192.168.1.2. So today what are things I am going to do is, the first and foremost thing, I am going to configure the interfaces for accessing the GUI of firewall 1 and 2. And the second part, through GUI I am going to show you how to configure the aggregated interface. So once we configure the aggregated interfaces, then the final part is we have to configure the policy and the static route. So let us go one by one for a better understanding. So first let us go configure the GUI part. Okay, so the GUI interface is port 2 and the IP is 84.50 and the other end IP is 84.51. Okay, so let us go to config system interface, edit port 2. So by default the mode is DHCP, so I'm going to change it to static mode, and the IP I'm going to set is a static IP 84.50. allow access HTTP and HTTPS. Similar way for the second firewall also port 2 and the IP address 84.51. So let us copy this and paste it on my first firewall. So let us log in with the credentials and let us paste it on the first firewall, and I have saved the configuration. So now let us jump to the second firewall. The interface IP for port 2 is 84.51. So set allow access HTTP. HTTP is mainly for accessing the GUI of firewall 2. So let us copy this and paste it on my second firewall. So let us log in and paste it on the second firewall. So I have saved the configuration. So now we can access the GUI of firewall 1 and firewall 2, and let us configure the aggregated interface, what we called as LACP. LAC aggregate interface is a process and LACP is a protocol we'll use for the link aggregation or link bundling. Okay, so now let us access the GUI part. Let us open Chrome browser. Okay, so now let us access. So 192.168.84.50. So this is my first firewall and let us log in. Username is admin and the password is okay. Similar way for the second firewall also. The second firewall IP is 84.51, right? That's the thing we have configured. So let us access the second firewall 192.168.84.51. Okay, so let us log in with the credentials. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, so now through this GUI part, let us configure the aggregated interfaces. So first let us go to the GUI 84.50. So this firewall is port 1, that is a host name. So let us go to interfaces. Okay, go to network, click interfaces and just click port 1. Okay, and create new. So create new, click the interface and now change the type to aggregate interface. This is 802.3 AD aggregate interface, and now change the name as aggregate. Okay, change the name as aggregate And what are the interface members? Okay, so the interface members are port 3 and port 1. So here not able to see the port 1. So I need to aggregate both the port 3 and port 1 also. So now let us find out that. Let us go to interface again. Go to port 1. So here it is showing us DHCP. Now change this to manual mode. Just click OK. Okay. So now click port 1, create new, click interface. And now change the type to aggregate interface and change the name as aggregate. Okay. So now let us check the interface members. These two interface members I'm going to bundle into a single logical link, that is port 1 and port 3. So port 1 and another one is port 3. I added this both these interfaces. Okay, close this and now enable the ping access. So these are the only thing I'm going to do, and additionally I'm going to configure this for a layer 3 LACP. So I'm going to configure this bundling link thing with the IP address. Okay, so this aggregate interface I'm going to configure with L3 IP, that is 192.168.1.1. Okay, so the IP is 192.168.1.1/24 and ping access enabled. Just click OK. So now we have configured the first aggregate interface and we have bundled port 1 and port 3. Why it is showing us down is still we have not configured the other end of the interface, that is firewall 2. I have to configure this and we have to bundle this. Okay, so then we can see this aggregate interface will come up, right? So now let us go to the second firewall. Just click network interfaces and click port 1 and check the mode. So this is manual mode. Just click OK and now click port 1, create new interface. Okay, so here also I'm going to add this interface name as aggregate interface and I'm going to bundle port 3 and port 1. Okay, the same way. So just change the type to aggregate thing. Just give the name as aggregate. Okay, aggregate. And now the interface members are again port 1 and port 3. Okay, now let us set the IP. I told the other end IP is 1.2. Okay, so 192.168.1.2/24. Then let us enable the ping access. Just click OK. So now you can see that automatically the aggregate interface between firewall 1 and 2 will come up. Just refresh this page and you can see. So this aggregate interface come up and it is port 1 and port 3 and the IP for this is 192.168.1.1. Subnet mask is 24. Similarly, let us go to firewall 2. Just refresh this page. You can see the interface came up. Okay, so through CLI, how we can view this aggregate interfaces? Just go to show system interface and the aggregate name. Okay, so just we added as aggregate. So this is the configuration I did through GUI. IP is this IP and the type is aggregate and the member is port 1 and port 3. Okay, these are the changes. Let us go to the second configuration, firewall 2, show system interface aggregate. Okay, this is the thing I have configured. And also additionally, I'm going to configure this mode as a active and one we can configure as a passive. So okay, so let us configure. Let us go here and let us go to config. So config system interface and I'm going to configure the edit aggregate. Okay, so edit aggregate and set the LACP mode. So we have to configure the mode, right? LACP mode we have to configure. That mode I'm going to set as active. So one end I'm going to set it as active and other end I'm going to set it as passive. So if you're both I'm setting as passive, the LACP will not get established, right? So one I'm getting as active and just save the configuration. Okay, so similar way let us go to the other end. So before that let us now check the LACP status between the firewall 1 and 2. So now let us check the LACP status between the firewall 1 and 2, whether that is established or not, right? So what's the command is diagnose. Okay, diagnose netlink and then we have to see what is the interface, aggregate interface followed by name, then the aggregate name, that is aggregate. Okay, so now you can see that LACP state is established and what are the ports it is showing is port 1 and port 3. These are the slave, we get called as slave in case of Fortigate firewall. These are the aggregate members and you are able to see the LACP status, right? and the corresponding MAC address. Actor is nothing but one end we call it as an actor and other end is partner. Similar way, let us go to the second way. So diagnosis, letting aggregate name, and let us now check the status from the other end also. Okay. So here also you're able to see the LACP state is established. So even though I not configure here the mode, by default the mode will be active. So if I'm setting both this particular firewall 1 and 2 to passive, it will not establish. The LAC mode will not establish. So always it should be in either active or one should be in active and one can be in a passive mode for a LACP to establish between the firewall 1 and 2. So now we have completed this part. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to configure this port 4 and port 4 with this IP address 10.1. So this gateway I'm going to configure 10.1 and this is 20.1, and then let us check the communication between PC1 and PC2. These are things I'm going to check. So let us now set the interface IP through GUI. Let us go here to the first firewall and just click interfaces. Okay, network interfaces and just click port 4, and what is the gateway is 192.168.10.1/24 and just click ping access, just click OK. Okay, so this is for port 4 I enable. Similar way for port 2, what is IP 20.2, that is port 4 for the firewall 2. So let us now access the second firewall. Just click port 4 and the IP address is so 192.168.20.1/24. Enable the ping access and just click OK. Okay. So now we have enabled the port 4 for firewall 1 and 2. So this is for the PC connectivity. And now what I'm going to do, let us go to PC1 and PC2 and let us set the IP. So I already set the IP. Now let us ping the gateway. Okay, so ping 192.168.10.1 I am able to reach. Similar way from PC2, let us check 20.1. Okay, so ping 192.168.20.1 also I am able to reach. Now let us do the ping connectivity to 1.1. That's the way we can check the connectivity, right? So let us do 1.1. So 1.1 I'm not able to reach. So I already told, after configuring these aggregator interfaces, since I connected PC1 and PC2, so we have to enable the policy and also I have to configure a static route. So let us now configure a static route. It is pretty simple. So since we access GUI, we can access the GUI and let us configure the static route. So let us go to firewall 1 interfaces, click static routes, just create new. Okay, create new. And what is the destination network? Destination network is 20 subnet. Okay, this is from firewall 1 and the destination is 192.168.20.0/24. Okay, and what is the gateway address? So the gateway address should be the 1.2, that is the gateway IP. So 192.168.1.2. So you're able to see automatically it took the aggregate interface. So in this particular creating a static route, you should not define this individual physical interface. Always you have to define the aggregate interface name. Okay, so that you have to keep it in mind. Just click OK. And similar way from firewall 2, I am going to create a static route to this remote subnet with this particular gateway. Okay, so let us go to the second firewall, firewall 2, and go to interfaces, static routes, and create new. Okay, and the destination is 192.168.10.0/24 and the gateway is 192.168.1.1. This is my gateway and the interface automatically it took, right, aggregate interface. Just click OK. So now we have configured the static route. So now let us do a connectivity check from firewall 1 to this particular interface IP. Okay, let us go here and ping 1.1. So still I am not able to reach, and let us check from the second firewall also. So till I am able to reach till only 20.1. I am not able to reach this gateway, this IP, right? So for that, what is mandatory? As I told, we have configured the static route. Now also we have to configure a static policy. So sorry, we have to configure a policy for allowing the communication from this aggregate interface to port 4 and port 4 to this aggregate interface. The similar to policy I have to configure for firewall 2 also. So for a quicker thing, what we can do, I'm going to show you how we can configure the policy through GUI only. Okay, so that will make the work easier. So let us go to, okay, just go to policy objects, just click IPv4 policy. By default, an implicit deny policy will be there. So manually you have to create a policy. Okay, So just name it as rule 1. Okay, just name it as rule 1, and the incoming interface, let us set it as, okay, this I'm doing from for firewall 2. Okay, aggregate interface, and the port 4. Okay, so port 4, and source let us set it to default all, and destination is all, and service I'm going to give all. Just click OK. And also you have to set the bidirectional traffic. I have to set from port 4 to this aggregate interface. Okay, so let us go here and just click create new and rule 2. So rule 2 is just a, so what is the rule 1 we have created? So just go to IPv4 policy. Okay, IPv4 policy. So what is the rule 1 we have created is aggregate to port 4. Now port 4 to aggregate. Okay, so rule 2 port 4 to aggregate interface, and just remaining things set it to the default values. Okay, and just service should be all, and just click OK. So now we are done with the policy configuration and also static route configuration completed from firewall 2. Now only in the firewall 1 the policy configuration is pending. So we already configured the static route, right? So now let us go here, just refresh this page. Okay, this never mind, just refresh this page. So we are done with this policy configuration. Now let us jump to firewall 1. The similar way we have to configure. So just go to policy and objects, just click the IPv4 policy. Okay, and now do a create new. So just create new. So rule 1, so aggregate to port 4. So these two bidirectional communication, aggregate interface to port 4, and remaining things set it to default value, just all, and the service also should be all, and just click OK. Similar way for the rule 2 I'm going to do from port 4 to aggregate interface. Okay, so just click create new rule 2 port 4 to aggregate interface. Just define the source as all and destination as all, and the service also should be all, and just click OK. So we are done with the policy configuration. So now let us view the configuration from the CLI mode. How to view the policy is just go to admin 4, and the policy show firewall policy. If it is IPv4 policy. If it is IPv6, you have to do show firewall policy 6. Just click enter. You can see the two policy what you have created. Rule 1 is from aggregate to port 4. Rule 2 is port 4 to aggregate. Similarly, from the second firewall, just do a show firewall policy. So this is the thing we have done, right? Port 4 to aggregate and aggregate to port 4. This is a bidirectional communication. So now let us view the routing table. Then let us go ahead and ping the communication between the PC1 to PC2 and PC2 to PC1. I hope you are following this. Now let us check the routing entry. How to check? Get, so okay, get router info routing table all. So now you can see the corresponding all the routing entries, which is mandatory, 1 network, 10 network, and the remote network. Similarly, let us check from second firewall, get router info routing table all. So this is my entry. So all the entries are there. So now we should be in a position to ping from firewall 1 to PC1 to PC2 and PC2 to PC1. So PC1 IP, let us ping the 1.1. I am able to do, and let us ping the remote PC 20.2. I am able to ping the remote PC from PC1, and also let us do a ping check from PC2 to this IP 10.2. Let us go to PC2 and let us ping PC1 IP 192.168.10.2. So now I am able to successfully able to ping between the PC1 and PC2. Okay, so today for a quick and short summary, what are things we have done is, first we have configured the port 2 interface for accessing the GUI of firewall 1 and firewall 2. Then these two interfaces through GUI, we have created aggregate interfaces, and we have bundled port 3 and port 1. Then we are able to successfully establish the LACP neighbor relationship between firewall 1 and 2. So LACP always should show as established, and we are able to successfully establish the LACP between firewall 1 and 2. And after that, what I have done, we have configured PC1 and PC2. So for the communication, mainly for the communication between PC1 and PC2, since both are entirely different subnet, I have to create a static route to this remote destination network from both this firewall, And additionally, I created a policy from aggregate to port 4 and port 4 to aggregate on firewall 1 and 2. Then we are able to successfully ping between the PC1 and PC2. So these are things we have done. And for reference, what we can do, let us check one more scenario. So let us set both this firewall 1 and firewall 2 to passive mode, and let us check the LACP state, whether it is showing as established, or we can check the state, right? So let us go to firewall 1 quickly. So config system interface, edit aggregate. Okay, now let us change it to static mode. Okay, so let us set the mode LACP mode as passive and save the configuration. Similarly, let us go to the second thing, just do config. So this scenario is pending, right? So config system interface, edit aggregate. Okay, and now set the LACP mode to passive. So now you should not establish the LACP neighbor relationship. Let us see what it is happening. Okay, so what's the command is diagnose netlink aggregate name. Aggregate name, what we have done is aggregate, right? So now we can see the status between LACP 1 and 2. So now after some time, what happened, automatically it went to negotiating state, right? LACP state, it is showing as negotiating, and let us check from the other end. Initially it was showing established, right? So after some time, automatically the LACP state went into a negotiating stage. Why? Because so both the things I have set it to a passive mode. Okay, so now let us do one thing. So one mode I'm going to set it as static active mode. Okay, so what are the conditions LACP form? One should be in, both should be in either active mode, or one should be in active or passive mode. Since both are in passive mode, the LACP is not established and the state is showing as a negotiating state. So now let us convert the first interface into active mode. Okay, so config system interface and edit aggregate. Okay, and now set the LACP mode as active and save the configuration. Let us wait for some time. Automatically you can see it both will go to into a established state. So previously it was in a negotiating, right? So let us see now. So now you can see previously it was in a negotiating state, and now you can see the state went to the established. So that is the main scenario. You have to keep it in mind. Both should be in either an active mode. By default, both always will be in active mode. Even if I'm not configuring a state as an active, by default it will be in active mode. So for an LACP to successfully establish, both should be in active mode, or one can be in active and one can be in a passive. Both are in passive mode, the LACP will not establish. So that's all about this video, and I hope you enjoy this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more videos. Thanks and have a wonderful day. Thank you.